Commission meeting. Would you please join me for the salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please take roll call?
Commissioner Mitchell.
Present.
Commissioner Levy.
Here.
Commissioner Bongio.
Present.
Commissioner O'Neill.
I see her.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner McCavour. Okay. Commissioner McCavour, are you there? All right. Commissioner.
I don't see her on the participant list.
Where do you do that?
Hello?
I'm so sorry.
I didn't hear that, but I'm here.
Oh, Melanie just joined actually.
Commissioner McCavour is here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are you trying to say my name?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry.
All right. At this time, I'd ask the director if he has any agenda modifications.
Stop for a second. Are we intentionally seeing everyone at the same time? That's different than what we previously done. Okay, now it's switched.
Thank you. So, Chair Bongio, there are no modifications to the action items on the agenda. There is supplemental for item number 33 and also supplemental number G1. I would offer at this time that perhaps it would be appropriate to introduce a new agenda item. Welcome the new planning commissioner, Ronnie Pellegrini.
That would be a great thing. And so it's a pleasure to welcome new second district planning commissioner, Ronnie Pellegrini. She's going to be a great addition to the planning commission. Known her for a long time.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate that. Looking forward to serving with my fellow commissioners and representing the second district. Hello.
Thank you. All right, so I didn't read the little note that I'm supposed to read, and that's in accordance with Executive Order N 29-20, the June 4th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting will be held virtually. And if you want to be on the Planning Commission meeting, you can go to the Planning Commission website and either join us by Zoom on the computer, or there's call-in instructions, and both of those are on the website. So the public is welcome to join us there. With that, we are going to go to public comment, and this is for any item that is not on the agenda tonight. So if anybody would like to comment on anything that is not on the agenda tonight, this is your chance. Oh, we got a panel. Okay, so let's go to Noah. I guess is that who? Yeah, Noah has a pen.
Yes, thank you. I don't know that this is possible for everyone, but
Noah, is yours? We're not hearing you.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
I can hear.
Oh, Brian says he can hear me.
And so can Mike. So can Mike.
Okay. I apologize. There may be a slight delay because I don't have the greatest internet connection. In fact, maybe it would be better if I blank the screen. All I was going to say is that in my experience, that sort of echo feedback loop that some of you may be hearing and I was hearing can happen when you are speaking and your device, your computer's audio output is coming back at you. So I actually have headphones in, which I think blunts that problem. But if you don't have headphones to plug in, it can help if you just turn down the volume on your computer when you are speaking, and then you don't get that feedback loop. That's all I wanted to throw out there. Thank you.
I didn't. Okay. Sorry about that. We're going to open this up for public participation, and I'm going to go over to attendees. And so the first caller will be public 2853. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. All right. So I guess there is no public comment. Sorry about that. So with that, we will move on to the consent agenda. Go through and see if there is anybody who wants to pull any of the items on the consent agenda, as we always do. The first item is Tree Farms LLC conditional use permit and special permit. Is there anybody from the commission or the public that would like this item pulled for public comment? Seeing none, we'll leave that on consent. The second item is Jade Haas conditional use permit. Is there anybody that wants this item pulled? Seeing none, we'll leave this on consent. Item number 3 is Brodt Ranch Wedding and Event Venue. Is there anybody that, you got one hand up? Seeing that, we will put this for public comment or public hearings. So pulled. So with that, we have items number 1 and 2, I believe. Tree Farms LLC conditional use permit and Jade Haas conditional use permit on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
I think Ronnie did also, but
Third.
we're not hearing you. I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear you. I'm sorry. So Ronnie, were you making a motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Who was the first?
Brian.
It was Brian. I'm sorry, Brian, I didn't see it. So we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? If not, I'd ask the clerk for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner McCavour,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Pellegrini.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries on the consent agenda. So we will move to items pulled from the consent and ask for a staff report on the Brodt Ranch Wedding and Event Venue. Is Tricia the I'm not hearing you, Tricia, but I see you're trying to talk. That help?
Tricia, hit the arrow down next to the mute button and it'll raise up a bunch of options. Hit settings, and one of the settings is the input. Go ahead and raise that so it increases the gain.
Do I need to turn my mic off or anything? See.
Probably, but that's not.
So Trish, we're still not hearing you.
How about now?
Yes.
Awesome. Yes, we can hear
Just
you.
gotcha.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
I can't hear you now. Let's see here. Let me turn up my volume. My volume's up. You can hear me. Let me try my selecting my speakers. I apologize, everybody.
Should we just go with?
I can hear you.
Now, good.
I can hear you.
Excellent.
Thank you for your patience. I appreciate you guys working with me on this. So let me share my screen. I have a PowerPoint slide presentation for you. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Now, I'm worried because I don't think I can hear anybody again. Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay,
Tricia, yes, we hear you. You're great.
I'm hearing you now. Okay. Here we go. So I'm presenting before you tonight a special permit and conditional or coastal development permit for a proposed supplemental use consisting of a wedding and event venue located at 530 Church Lane in the Ferndale area. And I apologize for these slides. Somehow I don't have that view up very carefully. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch on my computer view. Hopefully it's not too confusing. So we have the proposed use is seasonal, which would be conducted during the dry season and on the weekends. The property is approximately 100 acres, and the area used for the temporary events is comprising of about 4.5 acres. Existing structures would be used. There'd be no new permanent structures. The parcel is currently developed with a single family home, a 5,400 square foot barn.
Tricia.
Yes.
Sorry, can you go up into the top row up there and the little square box with the upside down T coming out of it? Yep, would you hit that, please?
There.
Thank you.
Okay, I apologize. So the I'm going back to that again. All right, so the use is, I have some a cheat sheet here that I need to pull up though really quick. And I'm afraid we won't want to. Okay, so the proposed use at 530 Church Lane is located at the end of Church Lane here. Church Lane serves 5 parcels, and it is comprised of a county-maintained road, which is in not the greatest condition. There are potholes, and it's not completely paved. The shoulders of the road are comprised mostly of rock with grass growing through it. And there is a little bit of a narrow roadway that starts to occur just before the last driveway right here where my arrow is pointing, if you can see that. After that, it widens up a little, and then we pull into church, into the 530 Church Lane project area. So the project site plan is fairly simple, straightforward. The parking area comprises of, it is able to accommodate 200 vehicles. The internal circulation is one way in and one way out. There is also a temporary kitchen that they're proposing. It's on skids. It's a temporary building that is not permanent. This is an area that would be used to prepare food that is brought in already cooked and catered by caterers. The barn area would be used for indoor activity, and then the corral area would also be utilized for some outdoor activity. There are some neighbor concerns that were brought up in the recent couple days, including today, and that is including dust impacts from traffic on the road, impacts to safety of domestic and wild animals, traffic and control safety, number and frequency of events, and then incompatibility with the neighborhood character. We do have conditions of approval that work through all of these issues, and to address the dust, the applicant has proposed to use calcium chloride just on the road surface in order to suppress dust before each event. The traffic control and safety includes a traffic control plan, which involves having monitors out on Church Lane to ensure traffic does not exceed a speed limit of 10 miles an hour. There are also pull-out areas in accordance with the recommendations of the Ferndale Fire Department so that vehicles can pull over in the event emergency first responder vehicles need to come through. We believe that the biggest time that the traffic control would need to be implemented is just prior to an event when vehicles are coming through to attend the event. Leaving the event, the traffic wouldn't be as intense because not everybody leaves at the same time, but pretty much everybody will show up at the same time. Number and frequency of events has also become a concern with neighbors, and we first heard this project last November at a zoning administrator hearing, and that is when we became aware the applicant wanted to change the project description from having 12 events per year to up to 18 events per year. It was at that point, we also had a few neighbors that attended, and it was at that point we had decided that we would need to take this to the Planning Commission. The staff report does state that for the first season, which would be this season, that the events would be up to 18. They've provided the calendar of those events, which is located in the staff report. However, due to COVID, things have been changed quite a bit, and they have had numerous cancellations. And so subsequent years, which would be considered next season, May 2021, the frequency of events would be reduced down to 12. The other concern is neighborhood character. Two of the neighbors enjoy their peace and quiet and are concerned about the auto traffic becoming a noise impact. However, in spite of the concerns, the staff report does show that this project is consistent with the Eel River Area Plan. This project would not impair the agricultural viability of this parcel or diminish its productivity over time. And this is because the events are not permanent, they're temporary. We're going to be they would be using the existing structures. There's no permanent changes to the land. Also, the AE land use designation, agricultural exclusive, is intended for the long-term production of agricultural uses, and the seasonal events would not prohibit long-term ag productivity. As far as the zoning ordinance is concerned, the use is consistent since it is a type of quasi-public and private recreational activity that is non-conflicting with the general ag uses. The weddings themselves benefit from the agricultural setting because people are seeking out that type of setting to have their weddings. This could also be consistent with the definition of agricultural recreation, in that this is somewhat of a recreational activity. And the definition of that includes things like dude ranches, ski resorts, anything that does not require permanent conversion of the land for that activity. The proposed uses are temporary in that they are seasonal, they're of limited duration and frequency, limited in size and intensity, and we also have a condition of approval requiring a seasonal or annual reporting by the applicant so that we can assess if there were impacts during that season and if those impacts were resolved, and as a check-in measure to determine whether or not we need to adjust any portion of their proposal. The project is exempt from CEQA. It is in existing facilities, and I also added in minor alterations to land uses because it's a minor alteration, like with the parking area where the cars would park. At the end of each season, they would aerate the area where the cars are proposed to be parked, and the land would be returned back to pasture or grazing land. And with that, I will conclude this presentation and offer it up for questions.
I have a question. I noticed that they can serve alcohol. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. They can serve alcohol at the venue, and does that have any impact on the, the one lane and the travel in and out, or the neighbors' concerns? And are there any other types of venues like this in that area that, or that you're aware of in the county that have worked through some of these issues?
Thank you for asking, Peggy.
Trish?
Yes.
Before you answer that, would you please stop the screen share?
Absolutely. There we go. How's that?
Thank you.
All right, thanks. So to answer the first part of your question, Peggy, about the alcohol being served, it is my understanding the applicant has provided us with a copy of their contract that they have their participants sign, which states that the alcohol use is going to be monitored, and if there is any impacts, say due to unruly activity, that the event would immediately be canceled. Now, this is on the event site. Of course, going out onto the road, if people have been drinking, then that is going to be a situation that the applicants will be responsible for talking to their participants, to their customers, and informing them that they shall not allow applicants to leave if they are going to be driving under the influence. As far as other projects in the area, I do know that there are a few other event venues within the county jurisdiction, and there was one recently approved. This would be not far from the same location, and they would be serving alcohol at their event also. And we haven't had any experience with traffic accidents related to alcohol after these events. So I can't speak directly to what would happen. I mean, anything's possible. Did that answer your question? Do you have anything else on that, Peggy?
I know there's different types of alcohol licenses that you can get, and I don't know what, if it's limited to just per use, they have to get it, or if they get licensed for just beer and wine. I have no idea, because that would not fall under your purview. They'd have to get that license separately, right?
So these events are going to be catered, and I believe a caterer would be responsible for having the license. I don't know what kind of alcohol license that is from the state, but perhaps the applicants can speak to this when they get up to speak. Thank you. I think Mike has a question.
Yes, I do, but I was waiting for Alan. I think he tried saying something, but it didn't come through. It was muted still.
It's a nice background.
I'm okay to ask?
Please do.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. My question is, in the report, it says that during the review process, that there was a vacation rental on the property and has since been stopped. What is that house being used for now, and how is that monitored? Is that just complaint driven?
Well, it wasn't complaint driven. We actually became aware of the Airbnb and the VRBO through that zoning administrator meeting. The applicant actually had brought it up, and not realizing that it was not a permitted use. So once we found out, we instructed them to remove the listings. And I have checked, as of yesterday, there is no listing on VRBO or Airbnb. They said that they would discontinue the use, and they have, as far as we can see that on that's the evidence that we have. And I think that's pretty much all I can tell you on that. Is there anything else?
So if it's not being complied with and neighbors see that, is that what it's complaint driven to bring it to the planning department's attention?
Yeah, John would also be a good person to answer that. But as far as my understanding goes, when there is a code violation, it is a complaint driven thing that is generated from the public. So if any of the neighbors are concerned about that, they can always give us a call, give me a call, or they could even file a code enforcement complaint if they wanted to, so that we can remediate it immediately. But the applicant has committed to not.
I would just add that in this particular case, if the commission's concerned about the presence of a vacation rental on this and want to impose a condition to be clear that a vacation rental is not authorized, that then if a vacation rental were to happen on this piece of property, it would be not only a violation of the code, but it'd be a violation of this permit. And the distinction there is then we could take action on this permit as a violation in addition to a code enforcement action.
Thank you.
So Brian, you've been waiting patiently, and I apologize. My mic wasn't going on last time, so I apologize.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to follow up on the description of the road. I believe Tricia mentioned that it was partially paved, but does that mean it's partially gravel and partially paved, or just poor condition pavement? I'm trying to understand how the neighbor complaints about dust fit into the condition of the road.
So it's a combination of asphalt that's deteriorated and gravel that is placed into the potholes, and the applicant has actually taken the initiative to do that themselves over time. The county hasn't come in to do that, but it is a county maintained road, and I attended a site visit with Public Works, and we did observe that a large part of the road on the shoulders, which is still in the public right of way, is consisted of fairly compact gravel with grass growing through it. So apparently there's been a few layers of gravel placed on the shoulders over time. Grass grows through it, it kind of becomes solid. Then there is the loose gravel though that does get placed in the potholes.
And we currently don't have any conditions placed in the conditions of approval or part of the operations plan that would specifically address dust. Is that correct?
We do actually. We have a condition that is requiring them to, and they propose to use calcium chloride as a dust suppressant. And I checked with the ag commissioner because I know there's some fields around there that have been certified organic, and the ag commissioner states that as long as the application of the calcium chloride is just on the road only, there shouldn't be any impact to the adjacent fields. So the applicant, we have asked them, or we have conditioned that they do apply this. We could modify that condition so that it would be more specific to regulate the application and when they apply it, rather than, because I believe the condition is somewhat general. It says they will apply calcium chloride in order to suppress dust. We could add to that condition saying that it should be applied at certain intervals.
Which number is that? I missed that my first read through,
Let
apparently.
me see here. I'm pulling up a Word document. You guys aren't able to see this, I hope. No, okay, good. We have condition of approval. Let's see.
Is that attachment 1?
It is attachment 1, correct. And let's see. It may need to be added.
Because I didn't see it and I still can't find it.
Yeah, it is discussed in the staff report. But I agree with you that it may have been overlooked. And I think this would be a really good opportunity then to add this as a condition with specific intervals. I'm not highly educated on how often you should apply this stuff to suppress dust, but this does present an opportunity to include that as a condition, a specific condition.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Noah, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, just briefly, I'm glad Brian brought up the road dust mitigation issue, but you know, in general, the staff report does seem to discuss mitigations for most, nearly all the issues that I saw raised by the neighbors' concerns. But one that struck me in the supplemental we received today, which has not been addressed, I believe, is the fact that this is a fairly remote area with already limited or poor cellular service, and 5 homes or whatever. To bring 200 to 300 people onto the property in this day and age, inevitably using or trying to use their cell phones could actually have a significant impact on that. And I guess I was curious in general if that's an issue that you guys may have confronted in any other analogous projects where a fairly remote situation periodically has a large number of people with cell phones.
That's not something that we typically run into as environmental or a permitting issue. It does happen, obviously, in a rural county where sometimes, well, all the time, towers are placed, cell facilities are placed in areas of the highest demand. And so obviously there's not that demand here. And so cell phone service, in all honesty, would be limited.
Seeing no more hands up from the panelists, I'm going to open this up for public comment. And we have 2 attendees that have their hands up. So let's see. I'm not showing the list. I don't know why it's not opening up. Rick Nicholson. First attendee is Rick Nicholson. Please address the commission. Are you there, Rick?
Yeah, I can barely hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm one of the neighbors on Church Lane. I believe there's a letter in there from my November in front of the zoning administration. A couple questions I had on this current application is hours of operation. I see the county recommends between noon and 11 p.m. on Saturdays, which I am fine with. I concerned with the setup days on Friday and tear down days on Sunday. What I've run into in the past, and as I presented before zoning, is these turn into 3-day operations with some events, setting up all day and tearing down. And also being in the agricultural business and that being a 1-lane road, it does impact my operation. So I would like to see hours restricted on Friday and Sunday for the tear downs. And the other question is, the applicant had in there possible weekday events, but I did not see that addressed by staff. I'm just trying to confirm that it would be Saturday, Sunday only. And if we can define events, are they just weddings, wedding showers, bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, etc.? I would assume that would all count as an event. And another question is length of time the traffic monitors would be present. And if we could be provided a written calendar as staff has recommended. The other thing I have is when and how large these pullouts are going to be constructed and where, because it is an unimproved county road and some of the shoulders will not take a heavy load, such as a fire engine or in my case, a hay truck or such. And also, I'm kind of concerned because there was already an event in February out of the hours of their proposed, or out of the time frame of their proposed calendar. And the reason I know this is not everybody necessarily puts up party tents from a commercial venue in their backyard, and with the increased traffic. It's not personal with the applicants. So the applicants are good people, but this does affect the neighborhood, and especially my house sits so close to the road. We hear every car go by, where my bedroom's literally within 40 feet of the road. So I do have concerns about the traffic and the dust. And obviously it does impact my operation because I do ranch also. So those are just some of the concerns I have right off the bat. I did see that they limited it to 4 events per month, which is nice. But keep in mind, if there's only 4 Saturdays in a month, that impacts, every weekend of everybody else that lives on this road. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Next attendee is 8404.
And Alan, are
Hi
you?
there. I'm here.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, my name is Callie Alexander, and I'm the daughter of Brian and Merritt, who own the venue. And I just want to say thank you, Tricia, for putting together that PowerPoint. And I wanted to I wrote down some notes to address all of your guys' concerns, just to kind of hit that. And so for phone service, that I saw that was a concern. We have never had a problem with service. We have totally perfect cellular service. We have Wi-Fi and we have a phone on site. And so in case of emergency, we're good to go. And then with the dust on the road, we're a certified organic farm. So the stuff we're putting down on the road it's not a problem. And then for the alcohol license, the bride and groom are responsible to get an insurance policy for that. So they take care of that. And then let's see, the fire department, we had come out and check the roads sides, and they said it was no problem for people to pull over on either side, and that cars could get by just fine because the shoulders are so large. And then I kind of wanted to just put our opinions out there and speak for my family. I'll just kind of give you a background. Our wedding venue began back in 2017 when my husband and I had got married, and my family and I decided to restore an over 100-year-old barn. And so it quickly became a hit because people just love the idea of getting married in a barn. And so Ferndale is the perfect place for it. So we had started the application process right away because 2018 people were really interested in having weddings. And so we had put in our application process at the Planning Commission, and then it kind of got shelved for a few years and kind of got lost. And then Tricia was able to find it, and she's been extremely helpful in permitting the process. And so we were kind of confused those 2 years, you know, why it got shelved. And then through those 2 years, our event or our venue got more popular because Humboldt, believe it or not, is quite the wedding destination. People, all the venues, it seems to be like fill up. And so we kind of are needed. And so we did think that 10 to 12 was reasonable then. And now we feel like, you know, 12 to 18 is more reasonable for us. So let's see. So we're all dairy farmers as well. We understand the agriculture on the lane and, you know, the room, but we do feel that the lane is plenty big because we actually make hay in our fields that surround the venue. And we are bringing silage trucks up and down that lane with tractors, and we have never had a problem. And so I wanted to address that concern. And then myself, I'm involved in the wedding industry, and my sister-in-law actually went to school to be a wedding planner. And so this venue was just like an ultimate dream. And then we all are kind of handymen. My dad's a contractor, so he's able to do quite a bit too. And then my brother's a highway patrolman. So it's actually been able to support myself and my sister-in-law, which we both have growing families with little ones. So we're able to stay at home with our babies, but also be able to be financially supported through this venue. And we're very thankful for that, but we didn't know that we would hit so many problems with the neighbors. And then let's see, we feel like with this venue, we're supporting so much more than just our family. We are supporting the whole town of Ferndale. We're supporting the whole town or Humboldt County because we're bringing business to shopping. People come to weddings and they stay at hotels. And we're supporting local vendors like event rental companies, caterers, florists, bakeries, hairstylists, hotels, bed and breakfasts. And those people all rely on us, people like us, to host events to make a living. And so, I mean, just right there's over 15 businesses that are relying on weddings every year. And it's clear to see that this year with the COVID, we're taking a hit. I'm taking a hit. I'm a wedding photographer, and I rely on venues like my family to have a income. And so I just feel like that we're supporting so much more than just ourselves, and we're really actually doing a good thing in this community. And so that's, I guess, my heart to heart there.
I'm going to ask you to please wrap up.
Yeah, do you have a question?
No, just to wrap up your question or your point.
Yeah, so I just want to say that we're trying to do good for our community and trying to support our family and others, and we feel like we've done a lot by bringing in a really amazing local business, and we just hope that we can keep working with our neighbors. We have complied with every comment that has come our way or any concern we have addressed to the fullest, and we are very easy to work with, and so we're just trying to make an honest living.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
We have another caller, public 1576.
Hello, my name is Marcia Engelbrett. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Good evening, commissioners, and thank you for your time in listening to all of this. I appreciate the time to be able to hear what's going on in the meeting. And hello, Callie and the Brodt family. They are neighbors of my family. My father lives on Church Lane, and my late mother, Sally, who just passed a couple of years ago, had been there over 30 years. The family goes back in generations, 4 or 5 generations back. So we're quite familiar with Ferndale and the Ferndale area for many years. I would like to make reference to material that my father presented and submitted back in November at the meeting at that time. And his name is Eldon Jim Engelbrett. And there's several items on that list that are still somewhat of an issue or concern that would need to be at least a conversation opened up so us as neighbors have a very clear understanding and see completion of certain things. And I really appreciate what I'm hearing as far as the attempt to get things accomplished, but I think the neighbors would be much more comfortable if they actually were completed before permit is given for this project. With regards to the traffic and the noise on the lane, excuse me, I have a page kind of answering some of the questions that Callie brought up. And again, this is with all due respect. The Brodt family and our family have a very good mutual respect. So I will go ahead and read what I had submitted today for those of you who may not be aware of it. So Patricia, it was sent to. The following are bullet points due to the short notification time of June 4th hearing date. Please revisit the original list concerns. There's pages 46, 47, 48, 49, and page 44 and 45 as well. The access is an issue due to Ferndale Fire Protection's District Inspection Summary, which came out and looked at the road. The report shows that the Category 2 road, 12 feet in width, which means it is not up to fire and safety code for the existing homes and agricultural businesses on the narrow lane. The addition of up to 200 vehicles per event in addition to support vehicles is an exponential increase and is a paramount concern. So for the neighbors, I know that is a big issue, especially with the fire department categorizing it as a Category 2 road, which means 12 feet in width. The fugitive dust issue or road dust is impacted as well, and that continues to be quite a huge problem. There's pictures that were submitted as well as at the request of Patricia Shortridge. And Patricia, I'm not sure if you received those or not. Hello?
They have been provided to the commission, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And just in effort, that was in a conversation and she had requested that pictures be submitted. The county road was actually at one time paved many, many years ago. And since then, in the last 2 to 3, maybe 3 years, there was a piece of equipment that came in and actually pulverized, probably scooped up about 10 inches of that road, and it was turned into pulverized concrete. And on top of that, there was gravel placed as well at various different times. So the type of dust that's coming off the road is definitely and clearly not agricultural dust. It's not soil dust. It is crushed concrete and various types of gravel that has been proven and documented to be problematic to livestock and to humans in many other areas in this country. And the clouds of dust of what you can see in the picture are of great concern. We have a organic dairy, and the grass, it's coated with it, especially near the roadside. And we do have concern, as always. My background is in animal husbandry. It's been my career my entire life. My father as well with animal husbandry and agribusiness. And we're very aware of problems that can be caused from various different types of situations. So that is definitely a big issue with us. Thank you for addressing the telecommunication. I'm so sorry. Oh, thank you. Thank you for addressing the telecommunication issue. I'm so happy to hear that it is good in some areas. Where we are right next to the Brodt, but down the lane, we have very, very poor internet service, and it does get impacted by youth. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your
caller.
time.
I'm going to move on to next caller, 2853.
Hello?
Please Go ahead.
Rosina. I have made some comments in the past about the dust in the road also. And just a couple quick comments, just to reiterate what other people have said. The dust is a major issue, but the narrowness of the road, even though the fire commission said that, not even adequate for existing conditions, that, maybe they would give an exemption because of good visibility. And my comment to that is, well, great, at nighttime, you're going to have 300 party and guests leaving at nighttime with no visibility as far as distance and stuff. And the addition of 3,000 to 4,000 people in a season to an area that's agricultural, you're introducing people who are not familiar with agricultural settings, agricultural processes, and these can create problems in the future. I also noticed there was no environmental reports required, which was kind of surprising. And the neighborhood character is going to change when you have 3,000 to 4,000 partying people show up in a season. Every weekend is taken. It just changes the whole quiet community nature of the whole area. It's somebody's wedding. They're not going to be like, oh, I'm having one beer and that's it. Let's keep quiet. It's their day of the year, their day of their life. And I just think these things need to be addressed before everything gets moved forward and, up to 18 events are planned. I mean, that's like 3,600 cars on a road that can barely support the existing traffic now. So that's kind of my comments. And like I said, a lot of them are the same comments other people have had. And, it's a negative impact on a sparsely community that has been there for hundreds of years with just a few people in a quiet area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next caller, 3053.
Good evening, Thomas Mulder. I just want to clarify, you can hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I just joined in halfway through the presentation. I'm hearing a lot about a Class 2 road and up to over 3,000 vehicle trips a year being considered to be approved here tonight. And I've heard with other applications, mainly more cannabis related, you're talking about some projects that are looking at 100 to 500 vehicle trips per year that have to upgrade their roads to a Category 4. So I'd like you guys to think about those kind of considerations whenever approving projects non-cannabis related. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Public speaker 8404.
Yeah, this is Callie again. Hi. I just wanted to address the concern of so many cars. Excuse me,
ma'am. If you've already spoke, you can't speak again. I'm sorry I didn't catch that.
Okay.
But
Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Just trying to be fair to everybody. All right. Seeing no more public, I will bring this back to the commission for discussion. Any I don't see a hand up. Okay, go ahead, Mike. I don't see your hand up over in the.
I know. I hate the little hand thing over there at the right there. It's hard to find, and it's easier.
I'm looking over there though.
I just had a question concerning. Has there been any talk about the hours restricted for setup and tear down by the staff to the applicant with some of the concerns that have been voiced? And I've seen a few to help cut down on some of that traffic.
Go ahead, Tricia.
Go ahead, Tricia, speak.
There was discussion with the applicant about those hours, and those setup hours are more limited. I believe it talks about that in the staff report happening. I'll review it again.
Is that in attachment 1 someplace? Or
no, it's not, but we could add this as a condition of approval, absolutely.
So tell me what was discussed then, please, in the report, because I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, no, that's okay. it was discussed to have those setup and breakdown hours to be starting around noon and ending around 6 in the evening. But this is not showing in the conditions of approval, I don't think. So let me pull up the staff report and see.
And then the hours for the Saturday for the venue, what is that again?
That would be from 12 p.m. noon to 11 p.m. at night.
With everything being shut down in the venue at 10 p.m. with music?
By 10 p.m. music would be shut down or turned down low enough so that it won't be heard beyond the property lines. But the event would be over at 11.
And by over, does that mean all the guests have left?
Well, the guests are going to be leaving not all at the same time. People aren't going to be staying for the entire event. So by 11 o'clock, the guests should be gone if the event's going to be completely shut down by then.
Well, that's yeah.
Commissioner Newman, I think I hear where you're going with that, and there needs to be not only into the event, but into the time that people are on site. And if I'm hearing you correctly, you want that condition to reflect the fact that there's an end time to the event, and then by a certain time, everybody has to be off-site. As the Portridge was mentioning, it would be important to not try to have everybody exit the site within a 15-minute period, because then you're going to have a wall of traffic going out. But if it's appropriate, we'll work on that during the commission discussion.
Yeah, my concern is that if we don't have some cutoff times in there, then it gets to be dragging on later than the 11 o'clock, say, shut off. I would say that 11 o'clock, having everybody, all the guests gone, would be appropriate. I know that caterers and others usually are cleaning up towards the end, and then they'll probably be still doing a little bit after that time, is what I'm guessing from events that I've been to. So that's why I was wondering about a time for cutting off the music at 10 seems appropriate from what I've seen with the neighbors and such, and this being out in the farmland there with a few houses close by. And I understand that the barn door helps keep it going from the houses and then going out to the ranch land or ag land that's to the rear of it, which has nobody back there. That's just my feelings at this point. I'm just putting that out there for the rest of the commissioners.
Yeah. May I speak?
Oh, let's let Tricia answer.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the interruption. So I'm looking at I developed a summary operations and traffic management plan for ease of reading. And the events would occur, it says the events would occur during weekends from the beginning of May to the end of October on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday between the hours of 12 p.m. and 11 p.m. Typically, weddings and other occasions will be held on a Saturday with setup on Friday, cleanup on Sunday. So we can specify the hours of setup and the hours of cleanup on Sunday. And then there was also reference to the music. And there's a bullet point in there. It states that the music will be turned down by 10. However, we can require that the music is turned off at 10.
Thank you. Brian, your turn.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you to the staff for doing such a great job and working with the applicant to develop the operations plan and the list of the conditions of approval. I feel comfortable that when we add in something to do with the dust mitigation, as well as addressing the changes to the setup times and ending times, that it adequately addresses any environmental impacts. And I am prepared to make a motion at the end of our discussion.
We have some more questions still, Brian, so I'm going to let those still go and then you can make your motion. Melanie, you are up next.
Thank you,
Go
Chair.
ahead, Melanie.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my internet's also slow. So I think it's a great project. You know, local employment brings people to Humboldt. It could be an opportunity for the neighbors to develop some side projects, perhaps. I do think that the noise is a potential problem, not one that can't be managed, however. And noise is really easily mitigated because it attenuates so quickly. So every time you double the distance, the decibels go down, the dBA goes down by 6. So at let's say you're at 1 yard and your decibel level 70, which is pretty high. By the way, the state doesn't allow you to go above 50 after 7 p.m., if that might be helpful for people to know. So if you're at 70 at 1 yard, then you double your distance at 2 yards, you're already down to 64. And then if you go again, then you're down to, you know, keeps going down by 6 decibels every time you double your distance. So it's seemingly a problem, but it's also, it also attenuates very quickly. So you'd have to be really close to experience those higher decibel levels. Now there are a couple of neighbors that are, you know, reasonably close in terms of the traffic. That one's a little bit trickier. There are things you can lay down on the road that will silence a little bit easier. That's usually the mitigation that we're looking at in impact assessment. The other mitigation is a form of compensation to someone who's really close in terms of adding, offering to put in one of the newer windows that have the gas in between the panes. So that's out there. I don't know if that's necessary for this project. I don't feel like it is, especially if after 7 p.m. you're going to have 50 decibels or dBAs or less. So I agree with Commissioner Newman that, you know, the music should be off by 10 regardless, because that can sometimes people will follow the rules. But other than that, I think it's a great project. Thank you.
All right, Noah, you would be our next speaker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just floating an idea that I'm not sure that I would support, but I thought it at least would be worth bringing up. I'm concerned about setting precedents here. I'm not even entirely sure that this is within our purview or legal, but that said, you know, this is a, while compatible with the zoning, it is a fairly dramatic, and I just want to say I really do support this and want to approve it in one fashion. It's just a matter of what additional conditions, if any, we might need to apply or consider. But I wonder if it would be reasonable in this case, due to the, you know, fairly dramatic different nature of the activity given the context of the surrounding properties, to require, if approved, that this applicant and this project be brought back in a year after the first year of operation, to not to deny the permit at that point, but to consider if there are any other reasonably feasible mitigations that we ought to append given the reality of what happened. I do remain somewhat concerned, for instance, about a couple of things that will be hard to know if they're a problem unless, you know, until it happens. How much dust is raised? How loud is the noise? Does it in fact deprive other neighbors of sell an internet service for a period of hours. I mean, those would be concerns of mine. And I guess I'll just leave it at that as a question. I can't think of many projects that we've done that for other than large repeating systematic events like, you know, Reggae on the River and things like that. But I'll just leave the question there.
Thank you, Noah. Next would be Mike Newman.
Thank you, Chair. The one other thing that I wanted to make sure that would be on any motion, I think this is a great venue. I've been out there for a wedding, is to make conditions about the Airbnb or the vacation rental as part of the motion that needs to be on there so that it would come back if there is a violation going on in that. Since it's been brought to our attention and it was done before, I think it should be a no problem with the owners here of this, since they're made aware of it now. And but I would like to make it a condition of the permit.
All right. This is Ronnie. I see you putting your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do think this is a good project as far as the wedding venue and the barn, and I appreciate all the comments that were made on this. And if we could add those conditions regarding the dust and the interval of putting this stuff on the road and the setup and cleanup times, the turning off of the music. And I do like Commissioner Newman's suggestion about the if the Airbnb is running again, that'll be a violation of not only that, but of this permit. And I think a lot of this can be covered in the annual monitoring report when it comes back to staff and make sure everything is in compliance. I think that'll answer a lot of these questions as well.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I'd like to, Peggy has her hand up, and then I'd like to have a comment.
So you said it's a county maintained road, Patricia. Did the county comment on whether or not they're willing to assume the responsibility for the increased maintenance on the road? Because I know other rural roads, it's often difficult for them to commit additional resources. And it is going to be a big impact to that road to have that number of people on there, particularly in May, October, when there could be rains. And for those residences that reside, you know, before the venue, to have their road not well maintained, I think that's an impact that should be borne by the venue. And I do support weddings. I've often felt that Humboldt County should promote itself as a destination. It's a very lucrative economic enterprises in other areas like Tahoe. And so I'm really supportive of this type of project, but I don't know about the road not having the individuals have to support the annual increases. You know, just throwing something on the road is not the same thing as maintaining a road, particularly with heavy traffic and, you know, rain in that area.
Can you answer that, Tricia?
This project has been discussed with Department of Public Works Land Use Division. However, the subject of more thorough maintenance has not been broached, and I think that would be more of a policy question, or not policy, but something that the department heads would have to really respond to on that because of the cost in maintaining roads.
If I could, one of the things we do rely on is Public Works to indicate whether or not this use would be a concern that needs to be mitigated or not. We have not gotten that feedback from Public Works at this time.
You stole my thunder. That's what the question I was going to ask, because I didn't see anything. I want to address the road, and I also want to address the question that Noah brought up about following up a year after. I believe we did the same thing back, it's been a few years ago, but there's a venue just outside of Willow Creek that is very similar to this, and they hold weddings and such. And we put a condition on them that there would be a review period after a year. I don't know that we ever got anything back on that, but I think we did put that condition on that. Getting back to the roads, I'm concerned with the width of the road, but I have a hard time saying no to this project when we approve marijuana projects or cannabis projects all over the county and call them class 4 roads, and they're no more than a 4-wheel drive trail, but we give an exception there. So it's, I think it would be really hard to say no to this, though I see the concern of the neighbors and I see the concern of the fire department. So I think that staff should have had Public Works in on this from the start, and I'm not sure where we should go with that issue. I see Mike has his hand up. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks. I had to lower my hand and then unmute. So one last question here was about the number of events per year. I see on here 18. That's a full calendar, just looking at what they had here from May 16th through September 26th. There was only two Saturdays there, or whatever those dates represent. I'm hoping they're Saturdays that were open during the course of that time frame from May 16 to September 26. So from the middle of May to the end of September, that was 18 events there during that time. I don't know what the other commissioners feel. That's quite a few for interruption of the farming community there. And I'm trying to remember through those letters that were initially put in here, if there was much about that, except for the one commenter about the disruption, or at least letting them know. So it could be that restricting the hours on the setup and cleanup, maybe that can be narrowed just a wee bit and leave it at 18 so that they do have that. I'd like to know if they absolutely need 6 hours for setup and for tear down. Is the applicant able to get on the phone and let us know, or do you know, Tricia?
I would defer to the applicant on that one.
Oh, hi there. Can you, repeat the question?
The proposal is on the hours for setup and tear down for the day preceding and day after, has been talked about for 6 hours. I'm wondering if that is fairly necessary for the full 6 hours during that setup and tear down.
Yeah, the setup, I mean, we usually don't have, say, more than, 15, 12 cars going down, and they're there, and then they drive back. So it's like, I mean, usually you do need about 6 hours to set up for a wedding, but the traffic is not heavy by all means on Fridays or Sundays. And so, I mean, we could definitely work with you guys, of course, to narrow those, those hours down, but I don't think it's a huge problem. But we've already, I think, addressed that in our, with Tricia earlier, that we were going to make a certain time slot, that they can travel down the lane.
So is 6 hours, that window, too much? Not enough?
No, I mean, I believe 6 hours is good.
What about 4?
So you're saying a window 4 hours to, I mean, so somebody can say come in at 12, but they have to be back down the lane by 4?
Correct.
Yeah, I do think that is a short time. I mean, I'm being all honesty, I work with weddings. That's not enough time to set up, but if we need it to be 4, we'll make it 4.
Okay.
I
right.
think 6 is feasible.
And you say usually there's 12 to 15 cars to help that come down on the set.
I mean it's or less. I mean, some weddings are only 50 people. So
Right. It depends on the size, of course.
It depends upon the size of the wedding. Most our weddings are under 150. I mean, we don't have a lot of big weddings, I would say.
Is it possible when you notify the neighbors, I know that that's part of the request here with the schedule, that you put the size of the wedding, proposed wedding?
Yeah, that would be no problem.
Okay.
I see Brian has his hand up. Let's give him a.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to chime in and say that I don't think it's reasonable, or it doesn't make sense to me to try to squeeze down the hours for setup and cleanup. I think compared to the day of the wedding, the traffic volume and impacts are so low that it doesn't make sense to try to squeeze them down to less than 6 hours. So that's my view on that.
My only thought on that, back at that, was just to let the neighbors know so that if they have operations going on, that they can plan around that, depending upon the size of the event. Because of course, as the applicant said, and as we all know, if you have fewer guests, there won't be as big a setup, and you won't need that much time, and there won't be that much interruption then on that road. So,
well, to your point, Mike, I think that letting them know the hours for setup and cleanup accomplishes what you're saying, but you trying to say, oh, can you do it in less than 6? Can you make it in 4? That's
no,
not reasonable.
I'm acquiescing to that. Just going noon to 6 is fine, with the notification to the neighbors of that, the number of guests that are expected for each of those events that will be on the calendar.
Noah, you have a question?
Just real quick, and yes, I agree with Brian that since it, squeezing the setup time doesn't actually reduce the vehicle traffic, I don't think that that's important. But just to go back to my earlier point, to modify it slightly, we already do have the condition describing the monitoring report, which I think is fairly comprehensive, except that as I read it now, it does not give the staff the leeway to impose or modify conditions. It seems to say, staff will require a report, including reports of complaints, and work with the applicant to try to adjust operations to address the concerns. And in the case of gross violation, or I forget what the wording is, it can be revoked. I wonder if, again, is it practical, is it legal to empower the staff as a part of reviewing the monitoring report with the applicant? Doesn't need to come to us, but if the staff were empowered to adjust conditions or add new conditions that are reasonable, I would feel more comfortable with those conditions as written.
Thank you, Noah. Any other questions? Go ahead. The director would like to respond to that.
So thank you, Commissioner Levy. I think that is I understand the nature of the concern to make sure that the conditions that are imposed adequately address the potential impacts that are out there and that that's monitored. I would feel very uncomfortable adding conditions after approval at the staff level. I would feel far more comfortable having that come back for a renewal before the Planning Commission. And if the Planning Commission decides that the conditions need to be modified, changed, or extended, to do that. I would also say that it would be a little bit dangerous ground to create a scenario, though, where there is a constantly expanding list of concerns and a constantly expanding list of conditions as part of renewals. And so in situations where something is dynamic and change over time, that's appropriate, this is fairly confined, fairly contained. And so it really asks the commission to consider whether or not the conditions that are here adequately mitigate the concerns that have been expressed.
Thank you, Director Ford, and that makes sense to me. And so I think that makes me more comfortable with the wording of the monitoring report condition, especially given the fact that I honestly think there is good faith desire on the part of this family to work with their longstanding neighbors and to take reasonable measures to accommodate their concerns.
So seeing no other hands up, does anybody want to take a stab at making a motion? Ryan.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to find the project exempt from environmental review pursuant to section 15301 and 15304 and make all the required findings for approval of the coastal development permit based on the evidence in the staff report, and adopt the resolution approving the proposed Broad wedding and event special permit and coastal development permit subject to the recommended conditions of approval with the following modifications. 1, adding the clarification that the setup time and cleanup time has to occur between noon and 6 p.m. the day before and the day after the wedding. Number 2, that we add a condition addressing the fact that the applicant must prepare and submit a dust mitigation plan to be approved by the director. And 3, to clarify that the music has to be shut off at 10 p.m., not 11 p.m., and that all guests must be off the site by 11 p.m.
We have a motion, Mike. Not hearing you.
Okay, now I'd second that with the addition of making on the conditions the vacation rental clause.
That's fine. That's fine.
So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I would ask the clerk to do a roll call vote.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Levy?
Yes.
Newman?
Yes.
Bongio?
Yes.
McCavour?
Yes.
O'Neill?
Yes.
Pellegrini?
Yes. Close.
The motion carries. Our next item is a continued public hearing, but I'm going to say that we take a quick 5-minute break, and then we will come back and address the ADU units. So we will be in recess for 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. We are moving into continued public hearings and the accessory dwelling units. So staff report.
Good evening, everyone. Mary Milner here, Humboldt County Planning. Our presentation tonight is a continuation of last week's meeting where we discussed the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, which is an implementation measure of the 2019 housing element. If I could share my screen.
Nothing changed. Oh, there it is. Michael.
Am I good with this? Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Could it be there we go.
What's that? Okay. So at the last meeting, we discussed about half of the ordinance as written, the inland ordinance, and we generated some comments and have some alternatives to that. And tonight we're hoping to get to the second half of that. So I'll just give you a brief overview of part 1 and part 2 as I have planned, and feel free to jump in. So part 1 is a recap of our last meeting, and it will focus on the questions that came up and the requested alternatives. And here's a quick list of them. We'll go through those in a minute. Part 2 of the discussion, we'll pick up the draft where we left off. And that would be where we started to talk about the section 5.6, which is our local controls on the various parameters that are within our jurisdiction to control. And you'll recognize that we haven't covered a lot of this stuff yet. And we have received a few comments between last meeting and this meeting. So we're going to try to work discussion in of those as they come up, and I'll point those out as we go through. You have in your supplemental at the very end, all of the comments, all the written comments we've received since the last meeting. So with that little overview, I'm going to depend on Michael also to fill in where he has his comments. So starting with part 1, which is the comments that we had last time in the request for alternatives. So in 6905.2, there was a question about the certificate of occupancy, whether we would go with the state's wording, which is in the current draft in that top box. No certificate of occupancy will be issued before the certificate of occupancy is issued for the primary. And it was suggested that we could strike that requirement. So we did a little analysis just to remind you what we talked about. The purpose was to allow the owner to live in the ADU while completing the primary, the purpose of the alternative. And the negative aspect of that is there's no guarantee that the primary will be built. So I'm not sure if we want to discuss or present, give opinions on the alternatives as we go through. Mr.
What
Chair,
would you like to see, Director?
Can you tell me what page you're looking at so that we're on the right page?
This is page 3 on the supplemental. And I think in response to the chair's question, it would probably be good as we go through these to try to get some consensus direction so that we're not going through it, having to come back.
Okay. And as far as page references, if you can use the section number 69.05.2, and hopefully I've got those numbers right. That's another way to do it.
Fine, we'll have questions as we go through each section.
Yeah.
So are there any discussion or questions on that, on the alternative one?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm not understanding what the problem would be if a owner built the ADU planning to build a larger primary unit, but something changes in the economy and they end up not building the primary. Like, what is the legislative purpose for requiring them to build both if they get permitted for both?
Well,
unfortunately, this didn't come with the instruction label, so I'm not really sure of that. There probably is some thought process on it, but I can't find the downside either.
Okay, then I guess my comment would be, I don't see any
Yeah, I can
purpose.
listen.
I don't see any legislative purpose for the language.
Okay.
We couldn't.
And I would tend to agree with that.
And so would I.
Okay. So we'll say Alt 1 is a,
All night I've been going like.
I mean, I'd be curious to hear from Alan and the other commissioners if there's something we're missing.
Well, the only thing I would comment is a lender, if there's a loan on it, might need a certificate of occupancy. It used to be we never did one on residential construction, and of the last probably 5 years, I'd say it's probably 50-50 that ask, depending on their loan company, ask for it. So I think it might be a situation where sometimes you'll have to get one. It's not that big of a deal. It's just something that the building department gives you at the end after you've got a signed off permit. So I think that you could just leave this out and it wouldn't make any difference to the whole situation. I just probably say it's optional, depending on the situation.
So you're saying go with alternative 1? Is that what you're saying, Alan?
I think that probably would be the best thing, because it really just leaves it in the hands of the owner. If they're getting a loan and they ask them for it, then they're going to have to get it. Usually it's their building contractor that's going to get it and give it to them. So I don't see that we need to have it in here.
Why don't you take a consensus vote on this?
The director would like me to take a consensus vote on this to see where we're at. So who thinks we should strike it? Probably the easiest way.
Do a roll call.
Do a roll call vote, please, Susan. Thank you.
Mitchell,
We'll feedback.
we didn't hear him.
You gotta unmute.
I like alternative 1, yes. For voting, if the motion was, do we do alternative 1? Yes.
That is the motion.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
McCavour,
Yes.
O'Neill,
yes.
Pellegrini,
Motion carries. We will use alternative 1, strike the above requirement. Thank you. So go ahead on next section.
So the next thing we discussed that we considered was short-term lodging prohibition. The current suggestion in the statute is that a ADU shall not be rented for a period of 30 days or less. We went through a little bit of research here and to look at it in more detail, where it's required and where not. As best we can tell, that if you're in a residential or mixed use zone, you're required to rent for longer than 30 days. In other words, there's a prohibition for short-term rentals in residential and mixed use zones. Outside of those 2 zones, it is permissive. The ordinance may prohibit short-term rentals. So we have a couple of alternative languages here. We've got 2A suggests that no rentals for less than 30 days, but it's limited to the first 10 years of the occupancy. A pro and con on that
is the positive is that it preserves permanent housing, and but it's limited in duration. The restriction expires at some point. The negative, obviously, is that it's a restriction on use of property. So alternative 2B would be more of an incentive approach. Fee waivers would be offered if the applicant makes a covenant not to rent for short periods of time or for the first 10 years. And the difference in that one is the incentive might be a little more effective in enforcing it than just stating it in the ordinance.
Go ahead, Brian.
I just wanted to ask, we have limited staffing in all that we do, and I'm just not clear how either one of these would actually be enforced in the real world. So can we address how we'd actually enforce this?
I think, Michael, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump in there. Right now, the county doesn't have a vacation rental ordinance, and people are obviously, well, not with a COVID situation, but are renting houses as short-term rentals, and it becomes an enforcement driven by complaints that we get. And so our second unit ordinance, you're given here a range of alternatives. The one that we included in the original draft just said simply can't rent it for less than 30 days. That's similar to the language we have in our zoning ordinance for all single family homes. And the enforcement of that would again be complaint driven.
Anybody else have any?
I do. This is Noah.
Go ahead, Noah.
I like alternative 2A. I think that alternative 2B is too weak because those who are unconcerned with a small fee waiver, I think we should be concerned that the ADU be devoted even in a, that it not be devoted in even a small fraction of cases to creating vacation rentals up front. I think that's not how I understand the overall purpose of it. It's to create more affordable housing. But I like 2A because it creates its own incentive in that somebody, if creates essentially a smaller rental unit and it is housing for 10 years, then they have options to convert it to a vacation rental, which may be advantageous. So I would favor that alternative. That's my
I would like to disagree just slightly with that, Noah. In looking at the housing element reports that we got as part of this agenda, we see that there's still a huge affordable housing crisis. And I think that our priority in these policies needs to be housing focused and not, rental property or vacation rental focused. And so I would like to go with the current draft.
Any other comments?
Yeah, no.
I don't see any other hands up, so the director would like us to take a vote on each one of these sections. So shall we just go with as a current draft since nobody's pushing a alternative? Well, Noah did push an alternative, I guess. How do we want to address that then? Do we want to vote on what are the...
Alan, can I just speak just to make sure that Brian is understanding me? I agree that the priority should be to create affordable housing. What I meant is simply that it's possible that Alt 2A might incentivize the creation of more of these ADUs for people who have a longer term vision of having more options, but it would guarantee that we have 10 years of affordable housing. But it's quite reasonable to say, yeah, but 10 years doesn't really solve long-term housing problems. And if we have a lot of these built and then they become vacation rentals in 10 years, we're back where we started. So I'm not really pushing hard for 2A.
I also felt like if we're getting people who are developing these ADUs with the mindset of hopefully wanting to rent them, that because enforcement may be problematic, that we'll think that they're going to be available for 10 years, but then they're actually going to maybe cut the corner and start doing it sooner.
That's reasonable too. You know, honestly, it wasn't something that concerned me about the current draft, so I'm happy to support that if that's the way others seem to feel.
All right. So the director's given me some direction, and the question would be is, do we want to go with the current draft? So we're going to have a roll call vote on that, and if not, then we can have the discussion of which one we want to go with. So can we have a roll call vote on going with the current draft?
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner McCavour,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill, Commissioner Pellegrini.
Yes.
Thank
The
you.
motion carries. We're going to go with the current draft as it stands.
So if everybody's agreed, I'll go to the next one.
Yes.
This was the manufactured homes section. And this is actually one that, an alternate that Michael proposed, I believe. Basically, since we anticipate at some point the standards for manufactured homes will be updated, instead of citing this section, this kind of long-winded section out of a different part of the Humboldt County Code, we're simply paraphrase it and make a reference to it. So that when that other section, 81.1.1.3, is updated, we won't need to update this as well. The difference between the part we think is going to be updated is the architectural requirements and the provisions regarding really old mobile homes, manufactured homes.
I have a question. I don't really understand this. Does this leave a window where someone can come in immediately and do something before there's a change? Does it still require that it not be more than 10 years old?
Yeah, because in section 81.113, as it stands now, that is the one in the current draft that'll still be in effect. We're not affecting the regulations. We're just not stating them in this particular ordinance. In other words, we're not repealing it or affecting it or saying it doesn't apply. We're simply saying, see that section if you want to know more detail on this rule. So we're basically just kicking it out so we don't have to repeat it later or make an amendment later.
Go ahead, Mike.
So does this also mean that, so either leaving them on the wheels, on the chassis, or making a permanent foundation, either one is okay. And when they're left with the wheels, it has to be entirely skirted as what that is saying there, and what will be changed then? Is that still the case?
Well, that is actually still the case, and that probably is not going to change. The thing that would be, Michael, if you want to chime in, maybe you have some more detail or a better way of saying this, but in about the center part of the current draft, where it says following architectural requirements with the roof overhang and some of those things. We've had comments and suggestions of revising that language. Is that right, Michael? Is that your understanding? So it's not the part about skirting, that will stand. And the effect of what we're proposing tonight doesn't really change anything, doesn't change the standards at this point. That would be a separate discussion and a separate amendment.
Right, this was this alternative is addressing the comment from Kevin Dreyer. He felt that the architectural standards that apply to mobile homes or manufactured homes are maybe going to result in unnecessary burden for property owners.
Let me ask you there, Michael, what you're saying there is the requirement that the manufactured homes have is adequate instead of adding like the 6-inch requirements that we've got somewhere else here?
Right, the current language of the zoning ordinance, not this ADU ordinance, but elsewhere in the code has requirements for manufactured homes, which is very outdated and needs to be updated. And what we're proposing in alternative 3 would simply reference the existing code. And so when that existing code gets updated, which we've got on our task list, then those new standards would apply to manufactured homes that are used as ADUs.
That sounds reasonable to me.
To me as well.
All right. Is there a consensus that we're okay with this one? It doesn't have much discussion from anybody. We don't have to do a roll call every time. Yes. Anybody want to?
Any objections?
Any objections?
Is it alternative 3 now?
Yes, alternative 3. All right, next section.
Oh, I forgot to put my pros and cons up there. You got them anyway. Okay, this next item was a suggestion that we have a size-dependent appearance standard, and reference was made to an example of Portland's code. And this is 6905.4 is where we would insert this. So at the present moment, our draft does not have aesthetic design standards for ADUs in general, unless it's a movable tiny house, which we'll talk about later. We do have some for that. But when I looked in Portland's code, I noticed that all of the ADUs are 800 square feet or 70% of the primary, whichever is less. So they're talking about smaller units than what we're considering. And it's a urbanized area, so it's a little different situation, but I thought it was important to point that out. And then from what I gather, they have a height dependent criteria for some of these design elements. In other words, if your ADU is bigger than a certain height, then you have to have incorporate these design elements. So what we thought might be good is Alt 4, and it would apply some kind of objective criteria. As we talked about, we have to have some kind of objective defined. It can't be ugly or something like that. It has to be an actual thing that you can figure out what it means. And if we applied it to everything over 800 square feet, that would be another possibility. So the upside of that is it may address some of the aesthetic concerns in residential areas.
The director'd like to address this one.
Thanks, Chair. One of the things I just asked that Commission be a little careful with this, because we really do not have design standards for anything else. And to impose design standards on something we're trying to encourage would actually serve to discourage the construction of these. And so in a city like Portland, which probably has a very robust design code, it would be appropriate that they would have design standards. So comparing county to Portland may be dangerous.
Director's definitely on the right track on this one. There's many projects that just get turned down in the city of Eureka and don't happen because they have design review, and it's very burdensome and costs a lot of money, and it's a lot of interpretation of what people want to see in an area and not really what somebody might want to do. And I think that we're getting away from what we're trying to do, and that's get inexpensive and housing built. And I think you're going to get very little anyhow. And if you do this, you're going to get even less. So I think you need to stay away from this.
Question?
Brian?
Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to support the current draft.
Okay, Mike?
So my question is we cannot, according to the director, ask that it be along the same lines as what the main house design is?
I think that's what our original commentary was last time, in that I'm not sure where we came out on that, but that was what spurred the discussion.
So that's my question again still.
So,
But it's maybe not a good idea. Oh, sorry, Michael.
Go ahead, Director.
It is entirely possible to say that it matched the architectural design of the main house, that it matched the existing building materials of the main house, that it matched the roofing materials of the main house. I think the thing that Ms. Milner says is, as long as you have very objective design criteria that somebody standing at the front counter can say, yep, that works, then that's appropriate. But one of the things that often happens with design criteria is it becomes very complicated and be very subjective. And frankly, one of the things that the state is attempting to do right now is remove subjectivity from all forms of residential development, because NIMBYs tend to use that as a means to preclude that kind of development from happening. So if you impose design standards on a second unit, and that becomes all discretionary, and a neighbor doesn't want to see a second unit or accessory dwelling unit on their neighbor's parcel, you will run into a scenario where the neighbor is saying it doesn't comply with the design criteria.
Melanie has her hand up.
Yes, I think last time we talked about having something where a larger ADU should look like the main residence, but a small ADU, I think in Portland, I can't remember now, I brought it up last week, it was, I believe, under 500 square feet, doesn't have to look like the main residence. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that. Thanks.
Noah has a question or has a comment.
Not a question. Yeah, no, I appreciate the reminder, Melanie, but I really am with Alan and Brian. We have a housing availability crisis, not an aesthetic design crisis. And I just think the current draft is fine. I don't think we should get into aesthetic design standards.
So do we have a consensus that the current draft is what we want to stay with? Any objection to that?
Yes, I'd like to see something that puts it like the existing structure. And if we go by size, I would be okay with that. You know, if it's less than 500 or whatever the square foot would be, that it doesn't have to be. I'd like to see it to where it's along the same design as the main house. It doesn't stand out like a sore thumb then next to the house as well as to the neighborhood, because everybody has bought their houses knowing what their neighbors look like.
So, how do you want to address this, Director? Okay, so we're going to take a vote whether we want to stay with the current language or come up with some different language. So would you do a roll call vote to stay with current draft?
Commissioner Mitchell. Okay. He wants to stay with the current draft. Levy?
Yes.
Newman?
No.
Bongio?
Yes.
McCavour?
Well, I'd rather see the 500 square foot or less be available in any style, but given that everyone else is okay with it, I'm okay with it too.
That's a yes.
Not everybody is.
That's a yes. Well, I mean, a majority, right? We're not going to get that one through, it looks like, so.
Commissioner O'Neill?
No.
And Commissioner Pellegrini?
Yes.
Thank you.
It would appear to me that the yeses had it, so we're going to stay with the current draft. Next.
This is the issue of whether to allow ADUs larger than 1,200 square feet under certain circumstances with a special permit. We got comments on this, which you probably looked at, and a couple of different suggestions, including, so 5B is no exceptions. So basically, that's even more nuclear than the current draft. The current draft, 100 square feet can be waived with a special permit. Alternative 5, up to 1,700 square feet with a special permit. So it's like the current draft, only there's a size limit. And 5A, it has 1,700 square feet plus a requirement of a 1 acre lot. So I've got pros and cons of those, which kind of are self-evident.
B, she never mentioned it.
All right.
Can I ask-
Melanie had her hand up first, so go ahead, Melanie.
I'm sorry, my hand was up from last time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just see that it's up. I thought it came back up. So who has a question? Mike Newman has a question. I see his hand, and then I see you, Ronnie.
Is there a hand button?
Mike?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm trying to get it unmuted, and I'll lower my hand afterwards then when I go back to it. We don't have, I don't have to see the pros and cons. They're pretty self-explanatory here. I like alternative 5A, where you have a special permit permitted for going up to 1,700 square feet when the lots are larger than 1 acre. I like that alternative.
Okay. Ronnie had her hand up.
Yes, thank you, Alan. I received a letter from a resident in the 2nd District in Hydesville, Ronnie and Nancy Bush, and I don't know if the rest of the commission got it. I was under the impression maybe they didn't, but they have a little over 6 acres in Hydesville, and they want to put an additional unit for their in-laws, and they don't want a size limit at all, but I think alternative 5A would address their needs. with lots larger than 1 acre. They're looking at a manufactured home builder in Fortuna to build this, and it's currently at 1,620 square feet. So just over and just under the 1,700 foot requirement. So I kind of like alternative 5A myself. That's all.
Any other questions? So we've had two people say, oh, Peggy, do you have something to say?
And, right now, can you build a second unit on a parcel? And if so, how large does it have to be? And how hard is it to get this special permit? Because, you know, you may have a 3/4 acre parcel and it's certainly large enough to put a 1,700 square foot house on there. So why not give them the option of getting the 1,700, the alternative 5, if they have a larger parcel? It may not be an acre, but it, you know, an acre is pretty large.
Through the chair, to answer the question of the commissioner, right now there's a 1,200 square foot limit on ADUs because that's the limit set by the state. There is no allowance for exceeding that.
Brian has a question.
I kind of like the current draft merged with 5A, meaning that if it's going to exceed 1,200 square feet, then you have to go for a special permit, and you also have to have larger than 1 acre. I'm not convinced why 1,700 is a magic number that under certain circumstances and that we would never consider a hard cutoff.
So once again, we have the situation where we're hitting all over the place. Do we want to take a vote on the current? Or?
Yes. Could I respond to?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add a little bit of a response to Commissioner O'Neill's question, which is why the acre? Why not 3/4 of an acre? And some of that has to do with just establishing a threshold. If the commissioner wants to establish something smaller, that may be appropriate. Although one of the things that when you get smaller, and if you're in a rural area, there are septic concerns and things going on that you want to have a little bit more property there.
All right.
I understand that, but if they're on a sewer system, then that, you know, may not be that as much of a factor.
Yes. So we're going to take a vote on if we want to go with the current draft or not. A roll call, please, Suzanne.
Commissioner Mitchell.
No.
Commissioner Levy.
Yes.
Commissioner Newman.
No.
Commissioner Bongio.
Yes.
Commissioner McCavour.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes.
Commissioner Pellegrini.
No.
Okay, so it's
5-3 or 4-3. 4-3. Yes, carries. So we're going to stay with the current draft.
Okay.
What is the criteria for the special permit?
Michael?
You know, yeah, that's a great question. We don't have any guidance for how or whether the project should be evaluated for consistency with the ADU ordinance. What we're left with is compatibility with the neighborhood, you know, standard findings for special permits.
So it's subjective instead of cut and dried, or more objective or rules driven and delays.
That's correct.
If I could.
Go ahead, Director.
One of the things I'd like to be really, really clear on, Commissioner Newman, I hear your exasperation with that, is that one of the things we are doing, making sure that ADUs of 1,200 square feet or less are absolutely objective, that they're approved consistent with the intent of state law. And so those are completely clear. This is just creating a bit of avenue for people to have a larger ADU. And you're right, there may be different struggles that come up, and there's not clear guidance right now. So.
All right. Move on to the next one.
The question came up at the last meeting about whether or not junior accessory dwelling units, what the situation was with having a bathroom and whatnot. So I just wanted to clarify that. So there's a separate part of the code that we just refer to without explaining it much. That's 65-852.22 in the blue text at the top there. So the parameters in the definition of a junior accessory dwelling unit are 500 square foot size limit, no separate bathroom required, and additionally required owner occupancy of the single family residence where the JDU is enclosed. Remember, it's entirely within a primary. And then there's a requirement for recordation of a deed restriction. So that's out of the definition of JADUs. Just as a side note, even if we don't address them in our ordinance, we have to still issue permits and explain all the rules. So we may as well put it in the code so people have decent access and can understand what the rules are. And then in the actual ADU code 2.2, the rule for junior accessory dwelling unit, the wording is exactly that it's within the existing or proposed space of a single family dwelling. So you can put a JDU in a new proposed building. But if you're going to do it in an accessory structure, which is also allowed, it has to be an existing accessory structure. Those are just points of clarification that have come up a few times with various people wanting to do this. So I thought I'd throw that out just as information. Our current draft refers to those rules without stating them explicitly. So you'd have to actually go look some of that stuff up. And an alternative, which is probably not a good idea, is we could just ignore them or decline to regulate them. But as I said, we still have to permit them because they're a state law creation. So I'm not sure if there's really a question here. This is more of an information slide.
So there's a question from Noah. Noah?
Yeah, thank you. I guess Mary kind of answered it, but I just wanted to be clear. These state requirements are requirements that would be binding on a local homeowner, correct? So, I mean, yeah, we're not really free to relieve them of the state requirements. So it seems to me if what you're doing is clarifying and stating what the state requirements are in the current draft, then we should just stick with that. Or is there something else you're proposing?
No, that is what I'm proposing. I'm just more or less putting it explicitly out there so we kind of have a reference of what we're talking about. Now it is allowed, to make our rules even less restrictive if we wanted to do that in some way. We could remove some restrictions if we wanted to. Anything that is less restrictive to creation of housing.
Okay. I have a question. Alternative 6, the county could decline to regulate JADUs. Wow, is that even an option? because there's been many things that I would love to have the county say, we're not going to do that. But the answer I always get is, oh, the state makes us do that. So we're required by the state. You know, I mean, how can we even put that up there? That seems a little.
I guess the gist of what I was trying to say there is that we could leave it out of our ordinance. It doesn't in any way affect the fact that it's still the default rule, even if we don't. In other words, we have an option not to have an ordinance at all if we wanted to, but it would just default to the state rule. So the option here is really we could not mention JADUs.
Actually, I don't think you need to.
This is not our recommendation.
So we're not going to take a vote on this at all. Okay. And the director's suggesting that since we've covered quite a bit of ground here, that we open this up for the public. So I don't see anybody, but I'll open it up for public comment and then we'll come back to the commission. So if there's any public out there that wants to chime in, please do so now. It looks like we have one, possibly 3053. Hello? No, nobody there. So bring it back to the commission, seeing no public.
No.
And keep going.
I just opened the line.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry. We'll open public comment back up. 3053, please. Are you there? Caller 3053? No. All right. I'll once again close public comment and bring it back to the commission and continue, Mary.
Okay. That was the last of part one. So we've covered the territory that we covered last week. So now we are into the second part of the handout. I can go through these real quickly, and at some point we'll probably want to look at the actual drafts, the color highlighted drafts that we looked at last time. So I'll show you what I've got so far, and then we switch. $690547 is something that was added. The director requested this, and as I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a clarification of what the statute is. Our current draft does not explicitly waive requirements for frontage improvements. And alternate 8 would be a statement basically saying no frontage improvement shall be required for ADUs. So if you look at, this is not explicitly addressed in the statute, but the statute actually limits the grounds for which you can deny a permit, and it is not on that list, this type of improvement. So an interpretation would be, it's not really up for discussion. Would you agree with that, John?
Thanks, Ms. Miller. The thing I want to just add in is what this does is eliminates a conversation that the Planning Commission often finds themselves in, is whether or not we install sidewalks and frontage improvements across the frontage of one parcel where there isn't frontage improvements. That's a normal requirement out of the county improvement standards. And so what this really does is it makes a statement that those improvement standards will not apply to ADUs.
I don't think Alan's going to be able to support that.
Oh, trust me, I'm all over this one.
I'm okay with that.
So do we want to keep it as the current, just go as current draft? Is there?
Well, I'm sorry, the alternative 8 is
the better
language that we do want to include. So we are recommending that you include alternative 8. And just for clarification, this is actually absolutely something that Bob Bronco, Public Works, is recommending.
So are we in agreement that we're going to go with alternative 8? If there's anybody that is against that? Okay, we're going to go with alternative 8. On to the next point. Wow, that was a good one.
Okay, this we're back to our favorite topic of design standards here, and this is in the definition or the standards for movable tiny houses as an ADU. Our current draft has a few design criteria basically that are similar to what we've been discussing. And the basis of these basically is to prevent people from using RVs as movable tiny houses. This list applies only, it doesn't apply to tiny houses on a foundation. Those are basically free of these design standards, but the design standards are really to address the issue of RVs. So I've got the alternatives on the second slide here. One would be to choose among those. I mean, if there are those design criteria that we think don't work, we could eliminate some of them. That's Alt 14, and Alt 15 is to apply the criteria only in certain places or allow localities to elect them.
I have a question. It's probably not related, but maybe. Is there any requirement that you have to have renewables on any of these units? Either the ADUs or the tiny home?
Renewable?
Not in this code. At this time.
Mike?
I'm for doing the design standards on keeping RVs from going into a person's yard and saying it's an ADU. I think that is fine there. I know we're trying to get affordable housing, but there's got to be a little bit of a standard.
Does anybody want to go back and look at what the standards are in more detail?
Go back to it.
Can I, sorry, this is Noah. Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
I mean, I agree with what Mike just said. I am, I'm wary of, as you put it on the last slide, prohibiting some innovative low-cost designs. Is it a problem to just say an RV with, some reasonable definition that most people would agree to at what it is not a movable tiny house? I mean, but not put blanket restrictions on the design that might rule out other forms of more appropriate, affordable, innovative housing options?
I can answer that. The real issue is the definition of an RV, which includes park model RVs, which are the classic tiny house. So if you say no RVs, then you have to decide whether somehow distinguish those from a park model RV, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I guess I do. Okay.
It's not the Airstream bubbles. It's the thing that looks like an actual cottage on wheels. So those can both be registered and defined as RVs.
Okay, well, you did answer my question, and I figured there probably was some reason why we couldn't make it that simple.
Are we leaning towards one of the two alternatives? Any input?
I like it as written.
Are we doing it as written? Back to the standards? Can you go back to the standards there, Mary?
Sure. Wait, too far. What? Having a little trouble going back. I'm going to pop out of here for a second. Sorry, hold on just for 1 second. Have to get oriented. Okay. So A through E, I don't know what happened to D. I guess I forgot to put a break in there. So the design standards are that the materials, the exterior wall covering has to be made of non-reflective material. Double pane glass is one of the requirements, and exterior trim is B. C is roofs with a 1 to 12 pitch for more than half of the roof area. D is plumbing to allow connection to an approved means of sewage disposal, septic, or waterless toilet. That seems like a fairly unshakable one. And E is if there is electric, it has to be up to code. So really A, B, and C are the ones that are kind of aesthetic issues.
Can I ask a question there?
Sure.
D on my original part here is highlighted in yellow, which indicates major areas where the county may use or exercise discretion to implement regulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So D could be taken out. Is that what you were purposefully doing there or not?
As far as the highlight issue?
On the current draft you have right there, you just forgot that out of there. Is that?
No, D is in there. It's just that I didn't hit the carriage return there and put it in line with the other ones. Oh, Zach, it's a typo, basically. In other words, D should be over in this A, B, C, D, E. It's just misplaced. Is that your question?
No, I'm seeing it in the original.
Yeah, if I could jump in.
Okay, it's up inside there. Okay. I see it now. Okay, thank you.
I see Melanie has her hand up. Go ahead, Melanie.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering if you had
just lost you, Melanie. We're not getting your voice. You're breaking up, Melanie. You could. You want to try calling in? All right. Well, we'll just keep moving forward. She might come back on. I don't know. Do about that. Noah, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. Can I just ask what proposed HOOPA modulars are?
They're basically a shipping container that retrofitted to be an ADU. It's kind of a proposed project. Maybe Michael can tell a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I could weigh in. The HOOPA modular facility is set up to crank out however many modular homes that you want to do, and typically they meet state standards for manufactured homes. So they wouldn't, anything that would be a movable tiny home would have to meet the state standards for RVs, not manufactured homes. But there is a lot of discussion happening about how to reopen that facility. It's been closed for several years, and it never was really operating at optimum capacity. And and there's a lot of value added jobs that could be created out there. And so that's what they're working on, is to try to get it up and running. And one of the designs that they're looking at is to develop these movable tiny homes, or just they could be permanent tiny homes that would be built out of something that looks more like a shipping container than a regular house.
Can I just add through the chair? Could I just add?
Go ahead.
When I wrote the cons for this, I've since talked to Michael, and he pointed out that number one, they could still be used as mobile homes, as a manufactured home. And secondly, they could easily, incorporate some of these design standards, and it wouldn't be cost prohibitive. So probably my con is maybe not too substantial. Would you say that's true, Michael?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thanks. That's very clarifying.
Could we agree that on just keeping with the current draft, it seems to hit all the points that we've talked about?
I just have one thing about the materials where it says of a non-reflective nature. I know I've been looking at tiny homes here for a couple days. Some of them do have metal on the outside, and it's more of a design feature than it is, the entire construction. Is that prohibited if you have that clause in there, or could it be less than a certain percentage of the house?
I mean, that's additional. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's up to the discretion of the commission if they want to limit the reflective materials to a certain percentage of the exterior. That's certainly a feasible alternative.
Okay. Looks like Melanie's trying to get back into the conversation, so let's see if she can reconnect.
Thank you.
There, Melanie?
Yes, I think it's fine. Hope so. My question was in regard to wood burning appliances that use wood as fuel. I was wondering if you had deliberated on putting anything in there for ADUs, or whether we're just going to go with what we currently use for homes. Thanks. I would be in favor of allowing more in rural areas, just to be clear as to why I'm asking. Thanks.
Yeah, our through the chair, our ADU ordinance doesn't regulate fireplaces or other heating infrastructure.
Thank you. So it would just go to the state and what we currently have for any type of home.
That's correct.
Building code would be whatever's in building code, if it is addressed in there.
Right.
So are we good with the current draft then? Any opposition to that?
I have one more question just to make sure that I understand. So if you go to a company and you buy a tiny house and it's on wheels, and they're usually about 300 square feet or so, and you want to have that be your tiny home, is that allowable here, or are you saying that that would be considered an RV?
That would be what's allowed, as long as it can meet all of these criteria.
Okay.
What about the reflective thing, Commissioner O'Neill? You were looking at some of those?
Yeah, I've seen that as a design feature more, just like you see that Danco built the building in Arcata, and it has a little bit of the sort of corrugated metal look to it. And it's more of a design feature than it is, the building material itself. And I think it kind of looks nice. And I think that you should be able to have it if that's what it's used for, and not the entire construction.
So what would you say percentage wise? No more than 10%?
10 or 20% maybe. And then more of a design feature as opposed to, you know, the construction.
I would be okay with that if that was added in there on part A.
Okay, so say 10% then.
Yeah. So let's get a consensus on this if we add that in. Is everybody okay with that? Seeing nobody objecting, we'll go with the current draft with that modification.
Okay.
Next.
690556. Oh, this is the one we just did. Let's see. 6905.6G is one of our special permit area requirements. And our current draft specifies that within the Jacoby Creek area, ADUs have to comply with a 5-acre minimum density limit as provided in the community plan. We had a commenter who is proposing that we delete that provision for various reasons. And I'm going to ask Michael at some point to maybe have a deeper discussion of this.
You want to wait or you want to open it up?
Yeah, I can jump in now if you like.
Sure.
Yeah, the restriction in the Jacoby Creek Community Plan is related to health concerns that the regional board expressed. They actually approved a waiver prohibition area for the Jacoby Creek Community Plan area that disallows any relaxation of any septic system requirements. And the reason why they did that is because septic systems were failing. They had a high rate of failure. They estimated in their publication, in their communication about the order, that about a quarter of the existing homes were had failing septic systems, and they actually had scientists that came up to take a look at the soils in the area, and on 26 of the 28 sites that they tested, those soils did not meet the requirements for sewage disposal testing. And so the Jacoby Creek Community Plan dealt with this by establishing a 5-acre minimum density, and that applied to subdivisions. It also applies to second units. And so it's a unique approach that's not done elsewhere in the county. In the Trinidad coastal area, there is a similar measure, but not in any of the other community plans. And the way that this is carried forward in the general plan is to say that the 5-acre density can be, you can get an exception to that 5-acre minimum if you can meet certain tests, and it identifies certain tests that you got to meet, which include verification that you're not going to be cumulatively impacting the water quality in the area. And so the reason we're including that as a special permit area in this draft ordinance is because there are these findings that we need to make in approving even principally permitted second units. And the only way we can make those findings is to have those permits be discretionary and not ministerial. And your commission did receive comments from Larry Henderson, and when he emailed the clerk of the board or the clerk of the planning commission this afternoon. He was giving a presentation, his side of the issue, and so I'm anticipating that he's listening in on our conversation and may like to address the commission on this. But that's all I wanted to say on that.
I have something to say on that. I understand there's other areas too in the county, because I worked in areas where they had similar situations. And maybe this would not be an area where you would put the larger units, but if someone's going with a tiny house, they can have a compost toilet. You know, there's ways of dealing with wastewater if it's a very small unit. And so I don't think that it should be, you know, maybe not a septic system, but if there's an alternative, like a composting toilet in a small tiny house, then it could be an option still.
I'm in agreement with Commissioner O'Neill on that.
Through the chair, if I could make a comment on the last two comments.
Sure, go ahead.
A few slides further down here, one of the areas we haven't talked about yet are the general controls on water and sewer, which I think will address the things that we just were talking about. But they're addressed on a broader scale than this one area.
Go ahead if anybody wants to comment. My screen just changed and I'm not sure what's going on. So.
I'll go ahead, Alan.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask staff if there were a project that came in the Jacoby Creek area that would be smaller than 5 acres, but could demonstrate it could adequately handle the additional capacity in its on-site septic system. Are you saying that it could be in compliance with this 5 acre minimum because it would meet those tests? Or are you saying that unless we go with alternative 7, it couldn't be approved because it wouldn't have a 5 acre minimum lot?
Yeah, well, through the chair, the applicable policy in the Jacoby Creek Community Plan, which is in Appendix C of the general plan, says that residential development at 1 dwelling unit per 5 or more acres may be permitted in the urban development area if it is determined that, and then there's 4 different criteria. Either public water or sewer services aren't available. 2, or B, the proposed development can safely accommodate individual water and wastewater disposal systems consistent with current county standards. C, that mitigation measures will assure that the proposed development will not cause adverse cumulative health or environmental impacts. And D, the design of the proposed development will not preclude the ultimate development of the site at planned densities. And so the development that you're speaking to, Commissioner Mitchell, could be allowed provided that mitigation measures are imposed that show that the development won't cause adverse cumulative health or environmental impacts, that the proposed development meets current county standards, and obviously water and sewer aren't going to be available to the site. So you meet that first criteria.
All right. I see Noah has his hand up.
Yeah, I basically was just going to ask what Brian did to underscore what Michael said before. I mean, I think the slide we're looking at is a little misleading. Would it be more accurate to say that the current draft says what that says, you know, must comply with that unless certain conditions specified in the general plan are met? I mean, I know this is just a summary, it's not the language, but I think you've already answered the question, which is that this is not a blanket prohibition. It's a default prohibition unless you can pass certain tests, which I presume could cover the sort of instances that Commissioner O'Neill brought up about, a tiny house with a compost toilet or something like that.
All right. Any other questions from the commission? I want to open this one up to public comment because there's one attendee that is here, and I think it's Larry Henderson, who's given us some information in our supplemental packets. So if not, I will go to public comment. Yep. Okay. Larry, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I kind of like to do a share, but I'm not sure how to do it. Can you see my screen at this point, or can I have instructions on how to share my screen?
Yeah, we're not going to be able to do that. We don't normally allow unless it was planned ahead. So just give us what
That's
like.
okay. What I would like to do is to, I can't even get out of here. Bear with me, please. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. What I would like to do is to go ahead and go through my short presentation to make sure everybody understands what my points are. Then I'd like to address that whole question in terms of what the effect is of that waiver prohibition. I'd like to start though by saying that the Jacoby Creek plan I was responsible for when I was with the planning department, so I understand and I know what the issues are regarding that 40-year-old plan. I am Larry Henderson. My address is 1933 Golf Course Road, which means I live in this affected area. And I am requesting that 2 sections be deleted. The first section is the one requiring all new ADUs within a community service district to connect to a public sewage system. The second section is that section listing the Jacoby Creek area as an ADU special permit area. Regarding my first request, connection to a public sewage system should not be required because it serves no purpose and because it would exclude ADUs where water services are available, but sewage services are not. For example, in the Jacoby Creek County Water District. They do not have the provision, they cannot provide sewage system. A density restriction should not be imposed in the Jacoby Creek area because it would be a greater restriction than imposed elsewhere in the county. To do so would be unlawful without real reasons why it furthers an overriding public interest. To date, no legitimate explanation has been provided as to what public interest might exist that is more important than my interest to have another dwelling on my 5-acre parcel located in Bayside. I have 3 questions. Does the county have a choice? Is there an overriding public interest? What test will be applied in determining general plan consistency? Does the county have the choice to delete the 2 proposed special restrictions? Or is there a local legislative mandate that requires them to be imposed? My answer is yes, the county has a choice. There is no county code section that would mandate the restrictions of either of the 2 sections. Consequently, a decision to delete or not delete the proposed sections is a discretionary decision, needing CEQA assessment and a general plan consistency finding. Are there special conditions of the Jacoby Creek area that warrant the proposed special restrictions? My answer is no. There is no overriding public interest. Provided the current state and local standards for water supply and sewage disposal are met, there's no valid nexus between the 5-acre density limitation and the health and safety of the Jacoby Creek area. There are no restrictions elsewhere in the county or the state with a 5-acre density restriction where public water service is or will be provided without public sewage service. What is the general plan consistency test? which is more consistent with the county plan to require or to not require special permits and sewer connections for ADUs in the Jacoby Creek area. The decision will not be easy as both choices have plan consistency issues. To impose the special restrictions will be consistent with the 40-year-old Jacoby Creek Community Plan 5-acre limitation for non-sewered parcels. However, to impose the restrictions will be inconsistent with many more policies in the recently updated County General Plan for additional affordable housing and orderly infill development. The conflict needs to be considered and resolved, and the test or your priorities need to be disclosed as to what is more important to the public interest. The planning department has explained why the special restrictions are appropriate for plan consistency. But the scenario of how the special restrictions are not appropriate needs to also be addressed. I suggest the following evaluation technique be applied here. Incidentally, this was used by the Planning Commission previously. What will happen with the special restrictions? What will happen without the special restrictions? What won't happen with the special restrictions? What won't happen without the special restrictions? So we just need to think a little bit beyond what's been presented to the Planning Commission. I would like to address the waiver prohibition. That prohibition applied from Arcata down to Freshwater. Much more area beyond the Jacoby Creek community planned area. But it was only applicable to the community plan. That community plan 5-acre limitation was not because of the prohibition waiver. It was because the city of Arcata intended to annex all that area at some point in the future. They did not want the county dictating what kind of development until it was annexed into the city. The public draft of the plan went through the Planning Commission, was forwarded to the Board of Supervisors with a 2.5-acre limit. City of Arcata at the Board of Supervisors said, we don't like that, we want a 5-acre limit. It was approved. That's how the 5-acre limit was in the plan. I think if you find the record, you'll find out that what I'm telling you is accurate. But there is not a reason for the 5-acre limit that is based on the waiver prohibition. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have. Obviously, I'm emotional about this because this is affecting my family and my life. But I would like to have input, answer questions that you may have of me. Thank you very much for listening to me. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. Does staff want to address any of his questions, or any of the commissioners have?
I think if we could, what I'd like to do is take a look at some more of what Larry has said and come back with a fuller explanation for the commission.
I think that's a good idea. So we'll bring this one back probably at the next meeting and address it. Is there any other public? I see another one, but there's no hand up. So I think that's it for the public. So I will close the Oh, now we do have another one. There was only one. So let's see.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thomas Mulder again. Sorry, I didn't hit *9 earlier. I'm just commenting. I thank you for actually having a smaller agenda so that way you could really get through. I've been hearing most of your going through the different items. I support some of them, like I keep saying, as I'm supporting like the idea of trying to have affordable housing. I think looking at the larger home size, I think we might end up driving this policy away from affordable housing. I know, especially in Southern Humboldt, we could really use some 1- and 2-bedroom houses to handle that affordable housing thing. I'm not so familiar with Northern Humboldt, but I'd imagine they have the same issues as well. And I support your conversations as you move forward, and just hopefully this moves through sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more attendees, I will go back to our panelists. And well, I'll close public comment and move back to the commission. I'm not sure. Brian, your hand is up. Is that from before or is this a new?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the last issue and also the issue of community services districts in general. It's a confusing issue and I feel like the two are related, and so talking about them separately is difficult. So I'm hoping that when we get to the community services district section, we can link that back to the Jacoby Creek plan area and have staff bring both of those back, because I feel like making sure if we are increasing the density in areas that are served by on-site septic, that it's not only a Jacoby Creek issue, that it's something that can affect the whole county. And so I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. Any other questions while we're on this topic? If not, we'll move on and we'll bring this one back next time and readdress.
Actually, I do really quickly, and maybe this is already covered by what the director said, but obviously most of Mr. Henderson's discussion was focused on the Jacoby Creek issue. Director Ford is going to take a closer look as a response, but the very first point in his letter is very straightforward and very general. And I don't know if there's something I'm missing, but you know, to the extent that that does apply to other community service districts, I would like for this not to be a de facto prohibition on those places. I hope that he's not correct in that this would be a de facto moratorium on ADUs in other community service districts where there is water provision but not sewage provision. Because again, at the least, I think there should be a test that can be met to allow ADUs within those areas. And yeah, I just wanted to call that point out so it doesn't get lost in discussion of Jacoby Creek. Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on to the next section? All right, seeing none, we will table that section and bring it back at next meeting, and we will now go ahead and move on to the next section.
Sorry, my thing's not cooperating here. Bear with me for a moment. I'll try to get this up.
You're doing great, Mary.
Thanks. Dang it. My buttons are a little fussy. I'll get this sooner or later. Not sooner.
I think that's the right slide.
This is the right slide, but for some reason, when I try to bring it forward, it's not wanting to go to the other mode. Oh, there we go.
I didn't know it.
We're into a more general area where we haven't really discussed alternatives yet. So this is more of just a walkthrough, and you can refer to the sections. I think water and sewer availability. I've got references here. Oh, correct. Okay, so what the statute says about water and sewer is that this is one of the areas where localities have discretion to make whatever rules they see fit in their area. So there's not, in other words, it's kind of hands off. So what we have in our current draft, I have, I think, 2 slides on this with some alternatives. One is in general for all ADUs, and I think this is ties into the previous discussion, water and sewer service. I'm not sure if this is one of the ones he wanted to get rid of, but I believe it might be. All new ADUs within an urban service area, or which is the service district, shall connect to public wastewater systems. And then outside urban service areas, sanitation and water supply must meet county health department requirements.
Yeah, if I could jump in.
Yeah,
here.
go ahead.
This is reflective of the Humboldt County's general plan. And it says in the land use element that all new development within urban service areas shall connect to public wastewater systems. And so this term urban service areas is applied to areas that have both public water and public sewer services available. And there's another corollary service area, which is a water service area. And those services districts only provide public water. They don't provide public sewer. And so what this general plan policy is saying is that if your development is within the boundaries of a services district that provides sewer and water, you need to connect to that sewer system. And so that's what we brought forward in our ADU regulations, our draft ADU regulations, to say that these ADUs need to meet that same test. And so what we're showing as alternative 9 would back away from that a little bit and allow for septic systems within these services districts that provide sewer where wastewater treatment isn't available. And you can count on one hand the number of services districts in Humboldt County that provide sewer. One of them is Humboldt Community Services District. They had a capacity issue. Actually, it was more of a connectivity issue with the sewer treatment plant that was potentially going to require, that did require massive public works projects, the Martin Slough Interceptor project, to redirect the wastewater flows in the area served by Humboldt Community Services District. If they hadn't taken on that project, this was in the mid 2000s, there could have been a situation where no new hookups were available within that service district boundary. And so the only way to develop your existing residential vacant lot would have been to build a septic system. And so this is kind of, this alternative 9 is intended to be a placeholder for that sort of a concern, if this is a concern for the commission.
This is Alan. I think this one's kind of another one of these, the state sets the standard. If there's sewer system there, you are required by state law to connect to it. So we don't have the option to say you can put a septic system in if you're within, I believe it's 200 feet of a sewer system. Now, of course, in certain areas where there is no sewer system, then you have to deal with the health department and put in a septic. But in areas where there is sanitary sewer system, you have to connect to it.
So Alan, what does it, I don't know because I don't build houses in town here, but what does it cost for a sewage connection, a separate one? If you're putting in a tiny house that's 300 square feet and you have to do a sewage connection, say to McKinleyville Community Service District, or, you know, what is that going to cost you?
I could not answer in all areas. I could only tell you in Humboldt Community Service District, and I believe the connection fee for just sewer is somewhere in the $3,500 range for the connection fee. And then you have to get the line, the lateral put in, and that's at your expense. So that's just the buy-in to the system.
And there's no way you would be able to connect a tiny house to your existing system?
Oh, you very well could. You asked what it costs to connect to the system.
Yeah.
I thought you
I have a second question. Could you do that, or would that be something the service district wouldn't allow?
Well, that brings up the question, you know, this whole thing with the ADU, the state has said that they can't charge for it. So if
they can't charge for the JDU, right? But can they charge for the tiny house type?
Well, I think that's if it's inside the existing.
Then they can't. But if it was a separate tiny house, then could we make a rule that said you could connect it to the existing house and bypass that connection if it was a tiny house? And would that be allowable, or would it violate the state law and the services district?
Well, it would violate, I believe, the services district's, at least Humboldt Community Service District's standards, but I don't believe that they could stop it because the state has said that they can hook in that way. But if you want a separate service for that unit, then they can charge. So the difference is if you're hooking into the existing lateral that the main house has.
I mean, these tiny houses, even though they're not very big, are $60,000 minimum is what I'm seeing. And so then you start layering on that, you know, sewer connection, water connection, you know, the laterals, all that, you're going to be in the $80,000 range pretty soon, just for a house that's 300 square feet.
I agree. That's the discussion we had last meeting. I mean, there's no easy answer on this one, because if you allow them to hook into these, then somebody's going to pay for it, and it's going to be the other ratepayers that are going to be subsidizing this. So it's not a good situation, but it's what we're faced with right now. So anyhow, I see a couple hands up. I don't want to hog the microphone. So Mike, you're up next.
So part of my question, okay. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is this alternative 9, what Michael was talking about was if there is a moratorium in a district and wastewater treatment hookup was not available, then they can go with an alternative. Is that correct? What is on this alternative, Michael?
Yes. It's not as clear as that. If it was clearer, it would include that term moratorium.
So the question would be, could you do that on the main house then? Could you build a new main house with an ADU and use that same ploy? This is an end around.
Yeah, well, that it gets into a conflict with our general plan policy. In this alternative 9 as well is how do you reconcile this with the general plan policy that says all new development within urban service areas shall connect to public wastewater systems. And so if we're going to go this route with alternative 9, then we need to also recommend modifications to the general plan that that align the two together.
I'm just going to comment back on that and then I'll open it up. I don't believe that if there's a moratorium, you are not going to be allowed to get a building permit for anything. And for an ADU or a small ADU or a portable ADU or anything, it's not going to happen. And if you end up going to court on it, you're going to lose on that one. Moratorium is moratorium. So Brian's had his hand up.
I haven't finished.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Thought you did. I apologize.
No, I have not finished because I was wanting to get feedback from Michael, and then things kind of
jumped in.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So this is just intended for ADUs. Is that correct? Alternative 9, Michael?
That's right.
Not for the main house or anything. And does the ADU, is there a size restriction or size differentiation available? If it's smaller than a certain size, can you hook into the main line in a urban service area for that reason?
There's no regulation that distinguishes between small and large units in terms of allowing connection to the sewer service. I'm not sure if that answers your question. And Mary, you had something you wanted to say.
I was just going to chime in with what I talked about with when I was doing the referrals. We had some discussion with the HCSD about that issue. And according to them, it's pretty much up to the owner how they want to tie in. There's no requirement. It's the discretion of the owner. And basically the HCSD has their kind of financial framework where they charge for their services. So it's not required one way or the other.
So does HCSD in this instance, or an urban service area, be charging to hook up to the main house for a ADU?
I'm not sure. I can't remember what he told me on that specifics.
Can I answer that one?
Yeah. I mean,
no,
please.
If you hook up to the existing house, if you request a separate lateral from the district to be brought into the property for that ADU, then yes, you will pay for that additional lateral.
But if you hook up to the main house, there is no additional fee?
No, this is the way I understand it.
I think that's my understanding as well.
And these ADUs are smaller, up to, in a urban area, the size can be up to 1,200 square feet. I'm just trying to go backwards here and remind myself what we're all looking at here.
I think the general limit is 1,200, unless we're to say special permits allow bigger.
Right, and I thought we did not change that to where it was over an acre, right? That did not go through.
I don't remember.
No, it's
the change was to allow a special permit for over 1,200 square feet.
Okay, without a size.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Brian's had his hand up, and then Noah. Brian?
Thank you. I feel like I can support alternative 9 for a few reasons. The first of which is it's just clearer, and I think it avoids the confusion potentially that some of the public commenters were making, that this policy was creating a de facto moratorium for services district that didn't offer sewer. Secondly, I feel like for as long as I've been paying attention, capacity planning and restrictions within community services district have been a major, restriction for building affordable housing. And if we can't build it within these urban service areas, then there's more pressure to build housing outside of them. And I think where we can best accommodate new development is within our urban service areas. And so for all those reasons, I think I like alternative 9.
So Noah has a comment. There,
yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I basically echo what Brian said. And I just want to be clear that as I read the language of Alt 9, that the clause at the end of the first sentence, if wastewater treatment is available, means not just that there is public sewage system, but that there is capacity for addition to it. Now I realize we've gotten into the question of whether you can just hook into the existing house, but the point is, if there were a moratorium that did not allow you to hook into the public sewage system, I would assume that qualifies as wastewater treatment is not available. Then you get to the next sentence, and it would seem that the second sentence really does clearly allow for a septic system, assuming it can meet county health department requirements. So that's all I got, and just correct me if I'm wrong in that understanding.
I think that's the way it's constructed, is to say exactly that, except we didn't put in that term moratorium.
Yeah, I think you're going to find out that one won't hold up if we were to go with alternative 9, and I would say that it's not a viable alternative because of that one situation. So I wouldn't support that, but it is, I'm not the whole commission, so go ahead, Mary.
But Alan, okay, sorry.
This has to do with moratorium. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, that we made a specific exception for areas where there is a moratorium, didn't we? Or was that drinking water? In other words, if I remember the clause, it was that a CSD is not required to supply service to an ADU if there's a moratorium. Didn't we?
Yeah, that's correct. It doesn't really get to the same issue there. You're basically saying that the CSD doesn't need to overextend its capacity. Right. Here, what we're saying is, if there is no capacity left, you could continue to develop your property by putting in an on-site sewage disposal system.
So do we have a, Mike, you have your hand up again. Do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'd support alternative 9.
Okay. It appears to me that we have kind of a consensus that alternative 9 is the way we're leaning. Is that, am I missing that, or is that the way you see it? You want to vote on this one? Well, I'm gonna say I'm in opposition to this one, but I can see it's going to carry, so I don't see any reason to take a vote. Do alternative 9. I don't think it'll hold up in court, is all I'm going to say to that. With that, we're at 9:25, and we have a little bit of housekeeping that we need to do, shall we say? So let's continue this to the next meeting. Do we need a motion on that to continue it?
Yes, please, to June 18th.
And then can we do them together?
Yes.
Okay, and then on new business, we have the 2018 and 2019 General Plan and Housing Element Annual Progress Report. Can I get a motion to continue the ADU discussion and the annual progress reports to the next meeting?
Also move.
June 18th.
The June 18th meeting.
June 18th.
Specific. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And who is a second? And who
Noah
seconded?
seconds.
Noah seconds. Roll call vote. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Mitchell. Commissioner Mitchell, I didn't hear you. Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Levy.
Yes.
Commissioner Newman.
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio.
Yes.
Commissioner McCavour.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill. I guess she said yes. And Commissioner Pellegrini.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
So the motion carries. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Could I just clarify one thing?
Oh, yes.
And to remind the commission that we agreed that we would meet on July 9th and July 23rd rather than the 2nd and the 16th.
Everybody note that.
Yes. And if I can just jump in to say, I really appreciated the presentation that Mary and Michael put together with the alternatives and the pros and cons. I mean, we didn't agree on all of them, but I thought it really clarified the discussion and moved it along. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard, Ronnie.
Good night.
All right. With that, we are adjourned. Bye, everybody.